President Trump did not merely seek to benefit from foreign interference in our elections. He directly and explicitly invited foreign interference in our elections.
There are some additional high crimes and misdemeanors that are specifically identified in the text of the Constitution, correct?
Yes, that's true.
What are they?
Treason and bribery.
Congress has just pulled a move that has Trump completely rattled right now. What went down behind closed doors could potentially cut his presidency short before he even hits year 2. This isn't just some empty resolution that ends up going nowhere. We're seeing actual legislative efforts put into motion that might put an end to Trump's presidency without any drawn-out investigations or debates. It's happening right now. The most shocking part, Trump actually anticipated this. He warned his party that if they lost control, things like this would unfold. And now they are, just as he feared. But instead of having a plan to counteract it, he's gone into full-blown panic mode, realizing that once this process gains momentum, it could easily derail his entire presidency. Now let's explore what just happened, because this is the most immediate threat to Trump's presidency since he took office. Several members of Congress have introduced emergency measures aimed at ending Trump's term without waiting for lengthy impeachment procedures. They're tapping into powers that many folks aren't even aware Congress possesses. Powers that enable swift action when a president is viewed as a real threat to national security or constitutional integrity. And trust me, they aren't keeping this on the down low.
Donald J. Trump abused the power of his office and violated his oath of office by extorting a new and inexperienced president. Mr. Trump has allowed foreign powers to interfere in our domestic affairs. He has endangered our national security and our democracy itself. For those reasons, we must impeach this president.
So, here's the scoop. A group of Democratic lawmakers, led by some representatives who have been working on this for several months, just took a highly aggressive step. They filed what are called emergency termination resolutions. And let me tell you, these aren't your typical impeachment articles that drag through committees and long Senate trials. No, these resolutions are much more serious. They invoke constitutional provisions and federal laws that allow Congress to jump into action when they think a president is a real danger. The language in these documents is pretty harsh. They claim Trump has been consistently violating his oath of office, and they're pointing out all sorts of actions that they believe threaten American democracy right now. This includes military operations he launched without proper authorization, executive orders that courts have already deemed unconstitutional, and blocking congressional oversight. They're painting a picture of a president who seems to think he's above the law. Now, this isn't just about Trump making a mistake that might warrant an investigation. Instead, it's saying that he poses an immediate danger and needs to be removed quickly before he can do any more damage. That's a significant shift in the argument being made.
You got to win the midterms, because if we don't win the midterms, it's just going to be, they'll find a reason to impeach me. I'll get impeached. We don't impeach them. You know why? Because they're meaner than we are.
Instead of saying the usual impeachment processes are needed, they're asserting that those should take a back seat because this is an extraordinary situation. And let's be clear, these lawmakers aren't just a bunch of fringe progressives throwing around dramatic gestures. They are representatives from powerful committees like the Judiciary, Foreign Affairs, and Intelligence. They have the capability to really push legislative action. They've been meticulously tracking Trump's actions and laying down a legal framework for this emergency removal, preparing for this scenario since he first took office.
There is no question that it is actually, I believe, not a debatable point at this point about the fact that he has abandoned his role of leadership, and meaning the role of the President of the United States. Has abandoned the role of the President of the United States.
Interestingly, these resolutions reference some constitutional provisions that most Americans probably haven't even heard of. We all know the 25th Amendment, but these go much deeper. They're using congressional authority to declare that a president has abandoned their duties. They're also bringing up past precedents from impeachment proceedings to support their case. There's some pretty intense stuff going down regarding Trump and Congress. They're actually pulling out some obscure legal jargon about removing officers who aren't sticking to their oaths. It's definitely worth checking out on John Brown's show because the legal arguments they're throwing around are fascinating. The idea here is that impeachment is meant for looking into whether crimes were committed. But when those crimes are already laid out in court decisions and the president just keeps on with them, they're saying Congress has the right to move faster. Trump's defiance of multiple federal court orders shows he's stepping outside the lines of the Constitution. And honestly, his presidency is seen as an ongoing breach of it. And man, Trump is really having a meltdown over all this. His social media is filled with rants claiming it's a coup, saying Democrats are out to overturn the election since they can't beat him fairly. He's calling this the most unconstitutional move anyone's attempted. Classic Trump deflecting blame by accusing others of what he's facing. But here's the kicker. He's not just taking shots at the Democrats. He's also going after Republicans who aren't jumping to his defense right away. He's even threatening primary challenges for any Republican who doesn't publicly renounce these termination resolutions demanding loyalty tests from his own party. That's not how someone who feels secure behaves. That's panic. It's as if he knows he's in hot water and needs all hands on deck to get through this. Trump's legal team released a lengthy statement trying to assert that these emergency termination measures are totally unconstitutional and that only impeachment, along with a Senate trial, can remove a sitting president. They claim Congress can't just make up new rules because they disagree with the current president. And sure, legally they have a point. It's uncharted territory. Courts will likely need to step in to determine if Congress really has these emergency powers. But here's where Trump runs into trouble. Even the fact that Congress would consider such actions is causing significant political fallout, regardless of whether it succeeds. Just think about how it looks. Multiple members of Congress publicly stating that the sitting president is so dangerous he needs to be removed not through standard processes, but via emergency measures. It's honestly hard to believe he said that out loud. The way Trump is responding shows he knows he's in hot water. His aggressive approach is all about defending not just his actions, but also trying to undermine the whole idea of being removed from office, especially in an emergency. He claims that if Congress can act this way, it could set a precedent that might destroy the presidency altogether. He argues that no future president would be safe from unfair attacks, which paints him as the victim here. Instead of focusing on his actions, he shifts the conversation to protecting the office itself. It's a classic move from his political playbook. Whenever he's in hot water, he makes it about how unfairly he's being treated rather than addressing the actual issues. He rallies his supporters by convincing them that any attack on him is an attack on them, too. Now, diving into the constitutional questions, things get pretty complicated. The Constitution outlines impeachment as the method for getting rid of presidents, specifying high crimes and misdemeanors. The House handles the impeachment. The Senate conducts the trial, and it takes a 2/3 vote to convict and remove a president. This is the usual process that everyone knows. However, some congressional resolutions are stepping into murky waters by arguing there's more authority at play beyond just formal impeachment, especially during crucial times. They're referencing Congress's inherent powers to uphold the Constitution and the oath every member takes to defend against threats, both foreign and domestic. Essentially, they're saying that when a president ignores the Constitution, Congress has the emergency powers to take action. This is where things get really divided among legal scholars. Some insist that Congress only has the powers that are clearly laid out in the Constitution, and that creating new removal methods just because impeachment seems too slow could change the entire balance of power. These scholars argue that even if Trump has done some awful things, he can only be removed through the Constitution's established processes. On the flip side, some constitutional experts believe the founders couldn't have possibly thought of every scenario. They argue that while the Constitution gives a framework and principles, it also allows room for flexibility when unexpected situations pop up. They contend that if a president continually acts in an unconstitutional manner and ignores court orders, the traditional rules may not hold. It's honestly hard to believe how Congress is handling things right now. Even with clear orders from the courts, they've got to have some way to act instead of just waiting for ages for impeachment trials. Let's be real. This whole situation is unprecedented. We've seen a president resign before impeachment could happen, like Nixon, and both Andrew Johnson and Bill Clinton were impeached but ended up acquitted. Then there's Trump, who's been impeached twice and acquitted twice. What makes this entire predicament unique, though, is that no previous president has actively defied numerous federal court orders and persisted with policies that judges deemed unconstitutional. Now, it's not just about the bad things Trump did. It's about the fact that he's still doing them right now, totally ignoring the courts. It shows that he just won't follow court rulings. And this breaks down the usual checks and balances we expect in our system. When those checks and balances falter, it seems necessary for Congress to have some sort of emergency power to maintain the constitutional order. If they actually move forward with these resolutions, the first step is getting them into the relevant committees. The Judiciary Committee will hold hearings, and then you can expect constitutional experts to weigh in with testimonies and legal discussions. If the committees choose to push them ahead, they'll hit the full House floor. It's at that point when things could really heat up because nobody really knows what the next steps are. Would it move to the Senate like an impeachment? Would the courts jump in to block it? Or might we see a fast-tracked constitutional review? We would genuinely be navigating uncharted waters here, which adds a layer of chaos and instability around Trump's presidency. But looking at the political side of things, this whole scenario is pretty strategic. Democrats are rolling out these measures just a few months before the midterm elections, aiming for maximum effect. They likely don't expect these resolutions to actually pass. They know the Republicans have the votes to shut them down, and courts would probably intervene too. What they're really doing is forcing votes. It puts Republicans in a position where they have to go on record either backing the emergency removal of Trump or justifying his continued presidency despite everything that's gone down. For Republicans facing tough campaigns, this could get tricky. It's definitely a tricky situation for Republicans as they head into the midterms. They've got to figure out where they stand with Trump. And it's not looking easy. On one hand, siding with him could turn away swing voters, especially those horrified by his behavior. On the other hand, breaking away from him invites the risk of facing primary challenges from his loyal base. It really feels like Democrats are setting up a no-win scenario for the GOP. Each Republican is being put on the spot, needing to decide whether they think Trump's actions justify emergency removal. They also need to defend Trump's moves that the courts have declared unconstitutional. And then there's the uncomfortable question of protecting a president who's not following the legal rulings. I mean, these Republicans in swing districts must be sweating bullets right now. Many barely clung to their seats in districts that Biden won, and they're trying to win over those crucial suburban voters and independents for re-election. They've got to make the tough choice of either defending Trump's most controversial actions or publicly distancing themselves from him. Trump, of course, knows exactly what's at stake, which is why he's been throwing around threats of primary challenges to keep Republicans in line. He's trying to convince them that straying from his side will have worse consequences than sticking with him. But that only works if he still holds enough political power to back up those threats. If his approval ratings keep falling, if more scandals pop up, and if courts keep ruling against him, Republicans might just decide that distancing themselves from Trump could be the safer bet. Looking at the Democrats' playbook here, even if the resolutions for emergency removals don't go through, they achieve some big political goals. They keep Trump's scandals in the news, push Republicans to defend unpopular stances, and energize their own base who are itching for action against Trump. Plus, it gives them solid campaign material for the midterms and seeds doubt about Trump's fitness for office that could grow over time. It's like a mirror to Trump's old tactics. He never stopped attacking when he was in opposition, always kept the heat on his opponents, and made sure scandals stayed front and center. Now, the Democrats are adopting that same strategy with relentless pressure, new challenges constantly cropping up and forcing uncomfortable votes and statements. So, what's next? These resolutions will be going through the committee processes, and the Judiciary Committee will be scheduling hearings. They'll definitely be bringing in some folks for testimony. So, there are these constitutional law professors, former federal judges, and legal experts who will weigh in on whether Congress really has emergency powers. The hearings will be on television, and you can bet every moment will be scrutinized. Trump's lawyers will likely show up to argue that it's all just an unconstitutional witch hunt. After that, the committees will need to vote on whether to move the resolutions to the full House. Since the Democrats control the committees, those resolutions will probably make it through, but getting them to the House floor will need some cooperation from the Speaker. Even among Democratic leaders, there might be some reluctance to push for this vote because they understand the constitutional gray areas involved. If those resolutions do make it to the floor, we're talking about one of the most crucial congressional votes in American history. Every representative will have to publicly state if they back the idea of using emergency powers to oust a sitting president. That vote is bound to be a pivotal moment for the election cycle in the year 2026, with campaigns springing up around how members vote. Attack ads will undoubtedly center on this issue. Now, if by some chance the House passes these resolutions, you can expect the courts to jump in right away. Trump's lawyers will file for emergency injunctions, claiming Congress is trying to carry out an unconstitutional coup. They'll argue that the separation of powers stops the legislative branch from just removing the executive, stating that only the impeachment process outlined in the Constitution is legitimate. So, federal judges will have to decide if these emergency termination measures can go ahead. This whole situation could escalate to the Supreme Court in no time because the constitutional questions at play are so fundamental. Lower courts would likely fast-track appeals, and the Supreme Court would have to decide whether to even hear the case or let the lower court ruling stand. Just think about the weight of that decision. Trump appointed 3 justices to the Supreme Court, convinced they'd rule in his favor. But justices don't always side with the presidents who appointed them. If the constitutional arguments against Trump are solid, and if the evidence of him defying court orders is clear, even the conservative justices might feel they have to allow some congressional action. Meanwhile, Trump's entire agenda gets thrown into disarray. Instead of focusing on policies, he's stuck battling for basic survival with his team consumed by legal strategies rather than governing. As he becomes more embattled, it seems like his political capital is just disappearing. Even if he manages to come out on top in the end, the harm done to his presidency by months spent battling this situation would be monumental. But let's take a moment to zoom out and see the bigger picture. No matter how this situation resolves itself, we are witnessing a huge test of the American constitutional system. It's worth considering how Congress will react when the usual checks and balances don't seem to work. What do we do when a president chooses not to obey court rulings? How on earth do we remove someone from office if they're ignoring the very processes meant to keep them in check? These are real pressing issues now, not just theoretical musings. This is a live constitutional crisis unfolding right before our eyes, and the outcomes will shape the notion of presidential power for a long time. If Congress succeeds in removing Trump using emergency measures, it sets a precedent that future Congresses could follow. But if Congress doesn't manage to pull it off, then it signals that presidents can pretty much ignore court decisions with little consequence as long as they have their party backing them. It's not merely about whether people like or dislike Trump. It's about the health of the Constitution itself, the effectiveness of checks and balances, and whether anyone, even the president, is really held to the law. Now imagine if Trump weathers this storm. If Congress attempts an emergency removal and fails, he'll come out of this more emboldened than ever. He survived 2 impeachments and numerous criminal probes, not to mention court rulings against him. If he makes it through this too, what checks are left to hold him accountable? It might lead him to believe he really is above the law, thinking he can act however he wishes because he's faced all of these challenges and nothing has stuck. That would be a nightmare scenario for anyone who supports constitutional limits on presidential power. A president who's evaded every check and balance, discovering that he is effectively untouchable as long as his party has his back. That's not what the founders intended with this system. It resembles an elected monarchy. On the flip side, if Congress manages to remove Trump through these emergency measures, it brings about its own set of problems. Every future president would then have to be wary that if Congress decides they want to remove them, they could just invoke these emergency powers. Partisan majorities could potentially take out any president they want. So here we are in quite the situation. Congress has just rolled out some emergency measures that could potentially end Trump's presidency. You can imagine he's in complete panic mode because he knows this isn't just a minor threat. His legal team is gearing up for some serious constitutional battles. And on top of that, his political allies are caught in a tough spot, having to choose between standing up for him or protecting their own chances to get reelected. It really is a test for the whole system, one that the founders definitely didn't plan for. What unfolds in the coming months will shape not just Trump's future, but the very nature of presidential power moving forward. Every single vote, every court ruling, and every strategic move is crucial because we're not just figuring out if Trump gets to complete his term. We're redefining what the presidency means from here on out. Trump had warned Republicans that this would happen if they lost control, insisting that Democrats would come after him full force. And he was spot on. Democrats are going all out, using every tool at their disposal to try and bring his presidency to an end. Whether these tools actually hold up constitutionally is something that courts will need to rule on. And ultimately, voters will weigh in during the midterm elections. Come November, it's all about whether American voters want Congress to hold such aggressive power over the presidency, if they think Trump's actions deserve this level of scrutiny, and whether they believe Democrats can handle this power responsibly, or if they view it as an overstep. Trump is banking on voters seeing this as a partisan attack, rallying to defend him against what he'll label a coup. Meanwhile, Democrats are hoping that voters will agree with their need for accountability, supporting strict actions against a president who seems to disregard constitutional limits. One of these strategies will turn out to be right, and that's what will shape everything moving forward. This story is just beginning with courts getting involved, votes being cast, and political conflicts heating up. While trying to govern a country that's deeply split on whether he should still be in office, Trump is really going to have his hands full fighting for his political survival. This is shaping up to be a monumental constitutional clash, one that we haven't seen in our lifetimes.